dozens of community television stations, and the irony of the fact that in many ways Venezuela has become a capital of an amazing example of what a government that is committed to community media looks like. And what, and, you know, and it's an unfortunate thing, I think, that Venezuela doesn't get looked at by the world as, by community media activists around the world, as this amazing example of what community media can actually be like, you know, and when it's being supported, right? When the regulatory system is being opened up to allow them to be licensed. And so, you know, it's funny because we're forced to respond to, you know, the right-wing distortion, as opposed to simply putting forward the fact that there's these amazing movements that are involved in actually transforming society there. And,
what do you think that U.S. activists can most learn from Venezuelan activists who are spotlighted in the book?
I think the broadest sense, one of the important lessons that we're seeing in Venezuela is, again, that dynamic of these social organizations, these social movements, and the way that they relate to a government that they support. So again, it's a situation where they have to fight what, actually one woman that we interviewed in the book, Iraida Morocoima, what she talks about is a dual fight. They're fighting against the, typical opposition, which is the, more right-wing, more conservative elements, the same kind of oligarchical elements that people talk about that have always controlled Venezuelan politics. They have to fight, of course, against the attacks that they are committing against this government that they've supported. But meanwhile, they also have to fight against that same government they support, I guess, in the sense of at least challenging the bureaucracy. And calling out, political leaders that are actually form a part of Chavismo, form a part of, the Bolivarian process. Some of these leaders are, ministers, and, they're not afraid of challenging and organizing and calling things out when they don't, when they see that things aren't working out the way that they need to be. And I think that's a really important lesson, and, again, gives a really important, I think, a different vision of what it means in Venezuela to be with the process. That this isn't an uncritical kind of populace. It's just these fanatical Chavistas, that are simply, zombies that are, not able to respond to what the government is doing, not able to think critically, and not able to act critically. So that, I think, is an important general lesson that we can learn from the Venezuelan experience. I think that obviously because of the situation that's being paralleled in Latin America, I think, and also here to a certain extent with Obama, right? Where there was, many progressives that, supported Obama's coming into power. And, we have to sort of figure out, how are we going to walk this fine line of defending this government against, a further right-wing, the right-wing movement, but also challenging it at the same time. And beyond that, I think there's all these little kind of bits of wisdom that, a lot of these activists really portray, and it comes from these 10 years of incredible political experience that they've gained, and you hear it in all these kind of amazing statements that they make, and in terms of the community media movement, for instance. One of the people we interviewed was Valentina Blanco. She forms a member of the National Association for Community Media, and helped form a community radio station in Trujillo State. And she talks about the need for community media activists, to get over their fear of technology, for instance. That's preventing us from really taking media into our hands. So these are just some of the things that people talk about that you hear, and I guess there's all these kind of individual experiences that are kind of hard to sum up. But I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from these 10 years that they've lived through.
Okay. You were talking about Obama there. How do you think Obama's foreign policy towards Venezuela and Latin America in general is different from George Bush's?
In terms of Latin America, I don't know that it is any different just yet. I haven't seen any indication that's any different or that's any better at this point. I mean, there's actually been these really horrible examples of how it might be even worse, actually. There's, I think, a double discourse or a double speak that's being used more. We saw that in action with the coup in Honduras, where there was this sort of, a waffling around it for a long time, and saying that we support Zelaya in this and that respect, but he messed up with this and his politics or whatever, and then in reality we did nothing about it. So I think that there's it's Eva Gonder has talked about this. I think forget what she taught, how she refers to it as soft diplomacy. I forget exactly the term she uses, but the idea, I think, is basically that or soft power. That's how she refers to it. The idea that you have the hard power of military invasion, these kind of things, and versus the soft power of these kind of I guess again, a double speak. Using making it look like we're in support of democracy, where in fact we're actually really highly connected and linked with, for instance, the coup government in Honduras, where we're working actively to build 7 military bases in Colombia, which nearly every South American leader came out against and really criticized strongly. Which criticized strongly because it's very clear that these 7 military bases are not meant to serve simply to fight against the FARC in Colombia. It's very clear that the capabilities that they have are gonna really are beyond the capabilities that they need to do that kind of war. I mean, the capabilities of these 7 military bases is it allows for a whole continental sort of surveillance, and it has a reach that's that will inevitably reach far beyond the boundaries of Colombia and the internal war that they have going on there, and Colombia's civil war and the Colombian government itself has already spilled over the borders in the past, as we saw with their incursion into Ecuador, and it's very clear that they were not really remorseful about that, and that's only one example of how Colombia's overstepped its boundaries and how the U.S. is actually really supporting that. So I think that we're seeing a stepping up of that with the building of these 7 military bases, and every Latin American leader in South America really recognizes that. Of course, Chavez himself has only been singled out a lot of times as being the single sort of voice against U.S. militarism, supposedly, but that's a role that Chavez gets ascribed in order to show that he's the crazy voice, when in fact it's a pretty regional consensus that that kind of military diplomacy that the U.S. is promoting is problematic.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I guess the only thing I think I might like to add is I hope that people read the book. I hope that again, that we help people rethink their vision of Venezuela a bit more, from this idea that it's simply this top-down political process, or that it's simply this sort of like cult of personality around Chavez. And our book really plainly, I think, shows that it's far beyond that, and that this Bolivarian political process is far beyond that. And I hope it helps people, to remind people of what is the reality, what's going on in Venezuela, and to remind people why those of us who have been paying attention to the political process in Venezuela are actually excited about it. It's not simply that we're excited about Chavez's statements on the world stage or anything like that, or that we're simply falling into this cult of personality type of thing, but that we're seeing really amazing examples of grassroots democratic action taking place there, and a government that's responded to that in many ways, and beyond the government's actions itself, this is a political process that that I think will, and that we hope will be able to transcend even the government's actions itself. That again, that this is something that has that can't be simply be contained or summed up in a single by a single definition of it, or that this is a political process that consists again of various social movements. It's a movement of movements, and so I hope people can read the book to really, I guess, see and understand that vision of what is taking place in Venezuela.